All right, hello, good morning. Welcome to another edition of Low Code Cafe number 89. We continue today with Got Data, Add a Dashboard. This is part 3, and we're going to continue to build out our health check dashboard project. Before we get into that, though, let me introduce myself. My name is Dale Warner. I am Head of Support for Plantin. With me on the panel today is Patrick Anderson, and he is our Customer Success Manager. And he'll be helping to keep me sane today. Big job, big job. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just saying thank you. Yep, I'm here.
This is an event we do every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Central Time, and it's a weekly and community webinar. We try to devote the largest part of it to technical topics, and that will be the case today. We have recorded all the past editions, so there's very many, another 88 hours of very good content out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/plantinap. Make sure you subscribe to that. Today's agenda, it's all Dale all the time. We're doing from the trenches. I'll give you a little bit of update about what's going on support, and then we'll dive right into the hands-on development part. Bogdan is in an undisclosed location today, and he'll be back with us next week. So with that, from the trenches, and actually, from the trenches, very little bit to discuss today. We've had 2 hotfixes released to version 1.20. So if you are on 1.20, you might take a look at your hotfixes section. This is the first set of hotfixes released. So there's 2. One to form builder, which we found a bug late in the process for Bootstrap 5, where if you have the saving animation, it appears initially instead of when you click the button. So that was kind of annoying, and we've cleared that up. And an oddity with listing builder about whether or not it shows data in a very special circumstance. That one I advise if you install it if you're having issues with either of these. They ready to go, but hotfixes in general, and if you're not having issues, there's no reason to install them unless we announce otherwise. Beyond that, I'll just mention that we have Campfire, a regular Friday event, 10 a.m. Central, this same hour, and we'll continue the conversation over there. And that's more of a conversation format, so do please join us. The link for that I will post here right now. Let's get that done. I'm going to put these all in the chat. But these are useful. You can register in advance for the low-code campfire. All of our link to our YouTube channel, our community portal, and the webinar feedback form. One that's not on there, I noticed, and we're going to be talking about it today a little bit, is the Campfire website itself. So that is campfire.plantinap.com. Grabbing some content from over there in our episode. Okay, so with that, we'll dive right into hands-on low coding, and we are continuing to build out a dashboard. This is part 3 of a series. In part 1, Patrick set up acquiring data. Last week, I dealt with charting data, and today we're going to expand on getting the functionality of the site, getting system status. We have a couple of more possibilities for this, and I think this would be interesting if you would use our feedback form and let us know whether you want us to continue on this or if you have other ideas. But the idea, the continuation would be about drilling down on dashboard data or making your dashboards more actionable, providing information where you can act on the dashboards. But here we go. We'll dive into part 3. Our goal today is to use the at a glance page that we created last week to display the status of a variety of our systems. And we're going to start out with 1 or 2, but we'll be linking in all of our public systems and perhaps more, so that you'll be able to go to our health check. You or we can go to our health check screen, look at a glance, and see the status of all of our sites. The steps that we're going to do, and we'll keep referring back to this today, but just as an overview, we're going to set up an API on whatever the various systems that we're going to pull data from that's going to provide the overall health check status. And then coming back to our health check application, we'll update the system so that it has the system entity, so that it has the health check API address, so that we can know where to go to get that overall health check. We're going to have to create an entity that's going to hold the data, and then we'll be building out a workflow to retrieve the health from one system, another workflow to get the health of all systems, where we call the first workflow once for each of the systems that are added, and then we'll set up an automation to retrieve the health periodically every 5 minutes or so. After we'll add a couple of systems to that just to demonstrate, once we've got all that infrastructure set up, that we can add as many systems to it as we need. And then we'll end out by building a custom display showing the health check status. So I think we can get all that in this hour, especially considering that we fast forwarded right into the segment today. So with that, I am going to start the process. So first one, configuring an API to provide the overall health. I have another system that we use internally called Service Desk, and this is an application where we monitor all the emails that are coming in and to the support address. And when a new case gets created, it notifies us. So we want to make sure that this system stays healthy. And so with that, we're going to create an API that's going to do that. You'll see me copy and pasting a little bit today, but just to help me keep things spelled right. So we're going to create a new API endpoint, and the endpoint that we're going to create is the health check overall status. So this is going to respond with the overall status of this particular system, and we're going to call this will be a get. It's going to be a very simple call. It is enabled. We don't need it to be in debug mode, and I'm going to choose not to cache the response. I want to get a fresh response every time. We could argue that this could be cached for a little bit, and especially if it were being used by more than just our endpoint. We're not going to have any input parameters to this, so it's just going to be a call to say, give me the health. And the actions, we're going to do some pretty simple actions. The first one is a create update tokens that's going to be used to set the variables that we're going to return. So create them, and the first one we're going to create is status. Now, some of you that are, I don't know if this is released to you yet or not, I think it is, but create update token has now been set up as an expandable, so if you have long tokens, and this was something that was requested on the feature request segment of our community portal, so love to point out that we deliver changes. So I'm just going to set status, the variable status or context token status, to normal as a default. And then we'll do another message, which is going to be that the system is operating normally. Now, the idea here is these are provided as the default. But you could add as many steps here as you wanted to check things within this particular system. And so this system would in the scenario, make the determination for itself as to whether or not it's operating normally, whether there's any messages that need to be reported. But we're going to just assume that if this API is responding to the call, that it's all we need to know. So then the next thing that we're going to do is to add a response, which is going to be a new JSON object. And with that, we are simply going to take the add two properties, the status property that we set above, plus the message property that we set. And so those two things will get returned in the JSON. And that's it. And yeah, we got a comment.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was going to comment on something else, but yes, I see Mark is excited to see the token value box, and I have to agree, I am too.
Yep, trying to scroll through that, or having to copy and paste out to some other editor just so you can see everything is a little bit inconvenient.
Yeah.
Yep. Did you have something
and also, Dale, I was just going to clarify that. So what's going to happen here is that just because the API returns a response, we're saying that the system is operating normally and it's healthy.
Correct. If we wanted
it's up.
to,
yep,
it's up. Correct. If we wanted to test something specific, we could run some SQL queries and say, that there's activity, or there's no errors, or whatever. We could add more steps between these two to set these variables to different values. But this is the simplest form, where just the response indicates that we're getting information back and it's up.
Cool.
So we'll save and test that and get a response. We get back status normal, message system is operating normally. So very simple API call that you can make as complex as you want. And then it gives us the URL that we're going to need to call this. Now I will point out too that I've chosen, and I'll go back in and edit, I skipped security and it accepted the default. So we have, it's a public, and anybody that has this URL therefore could call this. And in this case, so long as it's not abused, it's fine. There's no confidential information in the response. And so we'll just allow that to be. We could lock this down to make sure only our servers, for example, could call it. So Jim asked if it would act as a keep alive. It would help. It's definitely going to, I think the answer is yes, it will, because if we set up an automation to call this every 5 minutes, it's going to keep that site more active. I don't know for certain. There might be other configuration you want to do, like making sure the app pool doesn't recycle and things like that. A little bit out of my depth on that one, but it will definitely keep it primed from a VB.net standpoint, or .NET standpoint, where the site is fresh in API and in IIS, and therefore responding faster. Okay, so we've got our simple one. This is on our service desk. So now we move on to, this was the first step. So now we have to enhance our data to know where to go check the API. So let's see what that looks like. In our entities that we set up last time, one of the entities was system, and we can take a look at system. It simply has the name of the system that we're keeping up with. And that was sufficient for what Patrick set up in episode 1. But now we want to add another property. And so we'll go to system and edit it. And for the properties, we're going to add, I'm going to keep up with where I am elsewhere here. Like to keep matching again, so everything matches up between my development system and this production system. So this is going to be called overall status API. And this is going to be a URL. And we don't need to make this, oh, I guess we can make it searchable, sortable, doesn't matter, but just adding this additional property on, and let the system will override and let the system add that to the form. So that now when we look at systems, we see we have an overall status API that's visible here. And so we can edit that. So we're going to have a new system here. This is going to be called Service Desk, and this is the URL we need to add. So we will add new, and Service Desk, and the API call is that. And so, for example, this is clickable. It's going to open, and we get a system is operating normally message, so it's working. I'm going to go back. It's also good to check these in an incognito mode, for example, to see that it responds as well. Make sure that there are just no security issues that we're going to have. So we've opened this one up to the world. Community.plantanapp.com is another site, and I think I've already got this one configured, so we'll add that URL as well. So we go to configuration, APIs. We'll search for it here. Health check, and if we hit the play button, it's the same thing. It's got the same messages that are coming back. This is going to be a very standard API that we'll copy through our systems, but this is the call that needs to be made for it. So we'll edit this one and pop that in there. And we'll also test it just to make sure we're getting an answer. So we're getting good answers. So this covers updating the system to be able to link to the API. So now we need an entity that's going to hold this health check data. And, I'm going to find that. We're going to call this the overall health check. So if we go to configuration and create a new entity, again, we're not getting into namespaces at this point. We're just accepting the default, but we're going to have something called overall health check and the plural overall health checks. We are going to display that in the menu. It's going to have a dashboard, maybe, I don't know, we'll turn it on. And then I am going to put this under our systems page so that it's just going to appear there. This would not be something that typically an end user is going to see, but rather just to hold our data and administratively see. And so the data points that we want are, we're going to have the system, which is going to be an entity of type system. So every piece of health check data is going to be tied to a system. There's going to be a status, and I am just choosing to deal with this as text. And then, and that actually is going to be our display name as well, the one that links to it. And then the other one is message, the same information that's coming back from our remote systems. And I'm going to make this a large text, and sure, we can make this searchable. No reason not to have that sortable, even filterable. So nice little features that we can click in there with a couple clicks. I'm also going to make this visible by all users. So can view all entries, all users. That means that this will work incognito if somebody was to try to access this data. So we'll save that and see what we get.
And you're doing that because our intention is to make this a public page where people can check the status of our systems. That's what
right. Although the underlying data, I mean, people are going to need access to the data potentially, but not this. They'll probably not see the raw data. We're going to see the
charts.
The charts or the high level information. So this gives us then the ability, if we were to do one of these manually, we could say the service desk was normal and just goofy data. But so this is the idea that from periodically we're going to be polling the service desk system, and we're going to get the status of it, and this is just going to be a building status, an ongoing record of data. Because it's going to build, it's probably going to be useful to see the date when this was created. So I'm going to add the created date to the output. So we find it and add it. And maybe we'll just call this, we're going to rename it as of, it's the date that we create this record is going to be the as of date for this event. So we'll save that and take a look. So now we have an as of date for when we last heard from the service desk. Okay, and since that's just test data, I'm going to clear it out. And so we start with a blank slate, and we've done this objective, creating an entity to hold it. So now we get into the fun. We need a workflow that is going to get the overall health of one system. So let's see what that looks like. We are going to go into our configuration and go to APIs. And, oh, not APIs, or workflows. Stop me, somebody. All right. And so the first one we're going to do is to get the overall health for one system. So this is going to be something like this. Again, we're going to pick our default namespace. We're not doing much organization here. But the name of it is going to be to get the overall status for a system. And provide a nice description here. We're going to have one input for this, and probably maybe one output. Sure, we'll do an output. The input is going to be that we need a system. So system. So that's something that needs to be passed in, and it is something that is a type of an entity called system. And so when we pass in the number 1, for example, it will correspond to our systems. Number 1 will be community planning app, number 2 will be service desk, but we'll get all the fields that come in with that automatically through the input. And so that's kind of a nice feature. Just basically keeps us from having to read the record. We'll have access to it. And that's all we need, because we're going to get the system ID, and then we're going to go out and pull the remote system and see what's going on there. So in terms of output, I think we're probably going to want to output an error code. And this, we'll figure out what the right value for that is later, but the idea is that if something goes wrong in the call to the remote system, we can track what went wrong. At least it's see it, and so we'll be dealing with that. So now the fun, the meat, the process. The first thing that we're going to do is that we need to, we can go right to doing a server request to talk to the remote system. We'll do server request. And what we're doing is we're going to query the designated API to get the status. And so the URL that we're going to call is that one that we set up a little bit ago. It's the system status. So that's coming directly from here, overall status API. And because system was passed in as an input parameter, we have access to it automatically. We don't need to do, I mean, this is going to be a get call. We don't have to pass in any parameters to it. That's the way we set it up. And the output that we're going to get back is, we'll put it in a token called result JSON, just so that we have it, and save. we're also going to say ignore errors because we're going to handle them separately here in a little bit. So, and then, you know, I like to test as I go. It's we can develop it any way you want, but for me, I like to test as I go, see that I'm getting the right things. And so we could take the result JSON, for example, and output it just to see that it's working. And also the result JSON error, we could output that too. And so just to point out where that comes from, if we look at the bottom of the on error events, the output token name, result JSON, :error code is going to give us any error code that was returned by this item. So this is just very simply going to call it and then return back these two things, the JSON and any error code. So we can save it and test it. We'll provide it system to our service desk system, and we get back no error code, status normal, system operating normally. So we get a status and a message, and that's just what we had hoped. So we're in good shape there. We can continue on with our process. So the next step is that we're actually going to do a split. And the purpose of the split is, did we have an error or not? And so the first one is, the first condition of our split is if the result JSON error code is equal to nothing, then we'll go this way. And I'm going to move that a bit so it's more towards the branch. And so we'll take one set of actions that way, and then let's see, that I want another item, and this is, tell you what, I'll skip that for just a second. We'll do the other path in a minute. So the first thing that I want to do is, if everything worked correctly, is we want to parse that out. And so we will add a parse JSON into tokens onto our path here. And I'm going to be a little bit clearer on what I'm doing. I'm going to parse the JSON result, parse the result JSON into result tokens. And so the JSON string that we're doing is what came out of that other one. And the thing that we're going to create is something called a result. And so this will have our results. We'll be able to use it. So we'll save that. So we'll clean up the display here a little bit so it looks a little better. And then the next step is that now that we have our results that came back from the API, we're going to want to create a new health check data item. So, whoops, I keep doing that, this one. So this is going to be create new overall health check. This is going to help us create a record. And so what we're going to want to do, the first thing is it's prompting us for all the fields we need. So we're going to need a system ID. We're going to have the result status. And the result message. So in our last step, we created result, and it's going to have these parts, whatever was in the JSON, and then it's going to create that. The output token from this would be the record ID, and we really don't care about it. We don't need it, so we can ignore it. And so that gets us to our endpoint. So now let's see if I can add a see if I can do this right. In the other case, I'm going to click away from this for a second. This is the other case, the result code not being equal to blank. So I am going to just copy this and make this the alternate condition where the result code, I'm sorry, this one is going to be not equal to blank. So if it's blank, we do the normal path. If it's not blank, we do an error record. And so this is going to be basically that's the offline path. And so the variables for that then is very similar. We're going to have a system, still for the system ID that was passed in. The status is going to be offline. And then the message, we're going to take the JSON result that was from when we queried the server. We're going to get the error code, and I'm also going to put a slash in the error response, the other variable that was returned. So whatever got returned, but we're going to consider the system to be offline. And so we create a record for that. And now we need to close up our split. So let's see, should be here, something like that. And then this one will join up with we'll merge back in. So I'm going to take one of two paths. Either the error code is blank or the error code is not blank. And one way we will create we'll parse out the result we got and push it into a health check record. The other way, we'll create an offline record. So let's save and test this out with our system 2. And looks like I have an error in my, there's only a single quote there, and that's a little bit hard to see. So put a double quote there, maybe it'll run right now. Great, so we got back a result JSON that said it's normal, operating normally. And if we were to look at our systems, we want our health checks. So now we have a service desk that was normal, operating normally as of date. So that's good. So while we're here, I think it's useful to test bad setups, right? So, or we'll say bad setup, or if the system doesn't respond. So I'm going to edit this and change the URL to include a bad URL. And so this call is going to run with this, and it's going to fail, and hopefully it's going to give us an offline indication. We want the workflow to work, not blow up, but go that other path. So we go still with system 2. And so now we got an error code 404, and the JSON looks, it's the mess that came back from trying to run that bad URL. And so we can now check to see that we got what we hoped. So we'll look at overall health checks. And yes, we got an offline 404. So service desk as of this time is showing as offline. So that's cool. That's just exactly what we want. We'll put things back the way they're supposed to be so that it's going to work going forward, but we've tested both paths. Okay. And then a little cleanup before we go on to the next one. This is just junk data, so I'm going to get rid of it. We'll start keeping good data here in a little while. And so we'll back and save. We've got our workflows, get overall status for a system. So that's we've completed being able to get the workflow, get the status for one system, but now we got to get the status for all the systems. And so head there. So I can do a little copy and pasting. So we'll do that second workflow, and the name that we're going to assign it is get the overall status for all systems. So the logic here is going to be something like we want to get all the systems, and then we want to loop through them. It doesn't need any input because we're going to do all the systems. The output, it doesn't necessarily need an output. We'll probably not even do one at this point. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is to read all the system records and get the ones that we want. So it would be read systems. And we could get all of them, but I'm going to add a where clause. And the idea is that if there's no overall status API configured, we're not going to ask. So that is something like this. So if the overall status is not blank, then that's the ones that we want. And we'll leave the default of 1,000 records. We're going to create an output token called systems. Now notice in the help text, it says that the output, you can read it using systems::JSON. Very useful to know how to consume this thing. So in a minute, we're going to use systems::JSON. And so that gets us our list of systems. Next, we're going to want to create a list. And I've been typing the name, but if you don't know the name, you can click and find them here. So lists and objects, we're going to create a list from JSON. And the list that we're going to create is going to be called systems list. So take this title a little bit just to be useful, but we're going to use what came out of the last step, systems::JSON, to create systems list, and that's the name of the list that we're creating. So that here. This is for documentation, make it easy to see what we're doing. This is for the actual list that gets created. And so we will save that. So that gets us something that we can iterate through, which brings us to our next action. This is going to be actions for each list entry. So this is going to create a loop for us, and we are going to be looping through the systems list. And here are the actions that are going to be done with that. And it's really pretty straightforward. Every time we have a system, we want to execute the get overall status for a system. And the system that we want to do is the systems list. While I'm doing it, I'm just going to mention it's really great to copy and paste when you have, like we created a systems list before, and copy and pasting the list name. List names happen to be case sensitive, so you can save yourself some trouble if you copy and paste those instead of trying to type them and getting a different case. This outputs an error code and a result JSON, and we don't need it for this. We're just going to iterate through every system and do that, and then that's it. We could enhance this, and at some point we probably will, to for example, when a system is offline, we may want this this loop to detect how many systems were offline, and if it's greater than 0, send an email to somebody or send some other kind of alert to somebody to let us know that a system is offline. So we'll do more with this later, but for now, we're just going to loop through them and assume everything worked right. So we'll save it and test, and it finished up. And so let's take a look at our health check listings. And so now we see that it's gone to both systems, and both are operating normally as of this UTC date. If we, and just to kind of test again, if we run it again and refresh here, we see again, now we have more data, one for each system, and they're operating normally. Cool. So we have succeeded on our map to build a workflow for all systems. And so now this is a nice, easy one to do. We can add an automation to do that repetitively, periodically. So this get overall status for all systems, we just need to execute that once, say, every 5 minutes. We'll probably do 30 seconds just to get some test data in a hurry here, but this would be then a new job that would be, I want to keep the same names here, so I'll copy and paste. This is going to be the job to do overall health check for all systems. And I'm going to start by not putting a trigger in. We're going to test to see that the thing works, and then we'll do it. And so the only action we need to do, and again, these are in entities. Where are the entities? Oh. I'm going to search for them. Execute the get overall status for all systems is the thing that we want to do. And so this is going to trigger it for all systems. And so we'll save this and we can come in and run it now. We can take a failure. I know the problem. We don't have rights. We're trying to read a record and we don't have rights. So let's edit this, and we are going to operate in the context of user number 1. I just happen to know that that's a user with rights. So fast forwarding through my problems here. So it runs, it finishes, there's success, and so now if we refresh, we should have a couple more records, and we do. So we're getting system operating normally kinds of responses, so that's good. So finally, we can just edit this thing and add a trigger. This is going to be a time trigger that will do it every 30 seconds. Probably 5 minutes would be suitable for our purposes, but we'll, this is where we can adapt a little bit. We'll do it fast for now. So we save this. And so now if we were to watch it, you'd see it fire every 30 seconds.
Dale, I just wanted to comment that I like that flow of creating the automation without a trigger first to run it, and just to make sure it's doing what you want it to do, and then going back in and adding your trigger. Of course, it only works with it won't work with a database trigger, but I like, if you're using a time-based trigger, it works nicely.
Absolutely, and even like in the database trigger thing, you can find ways to, to ease your way in, right? Especially,
right.
If you're in a development environment, it's no problem. But if you set up a database trigger and you do it wrong and it ends up being recursive, that can be ugly. So just finding your way in slowly is.
Lots of saving, testing, and editing again. It's always a good idea.
Yep. Good. Thanks. So I think the last thing, we can do more systems, right? And because we have these two, community and service desk, but let's say that we want to add Campfire, another of our sites, to it. So very easy to do. We're going to have to grab this API and put it in the same place. Now I have it in Service Desk. This is the one we just built. So if we look for this overall health check and use the export button, we're going to export this endpoint. And so we can just copy it and put it into another system. We'll go over to Campfire. Probably need to log in here. So we can go right to the configuration of Campfire and the APIs and see that we don't have this already. We search for it and it's not there. We can just import it, paste it in here, and now we have this. This is ready to respond. And again, it's just the same endpoint we did, where it is a get, has no parameters, and it's going to return these two things, status and message. We could now customize it to say, well, what's going on, particularly in Campfire, what constitutes a system up or a system down. We could add more steps, but we just want a basic response, and so now we can get the response for Campfire. So let's now enable this in our systems list, and so now we have Campfire and provide the API and add it. And so now the next time that the system, that this automation runs, we will see that. And I'm just going to let it run naturally so that hopefully we prove that this stuff is all working. So we look at our overall health checks, and sort backwards by ID here. Yep, so now we have a Campfire 1 coming in. So you can see that once we get this this plumbing all set up, it's very easy. You know, in a matter of 2 minutes, you can add another system. So we can put all of our systems in and collect data for them. So now we're on to the fun and the public part, the build a custom display listing. And I have some steps, some ideas what we can do about that. And so this is just going to be a listing. We're going to put it on that at a glance page, but we'll start with, we've got this data that has, you know, we've got a lot of data, but we need to have just the last one. And so we'll go ahead and acquire the last status for every system. And so that'll be our first challenge. And then we'll provide that basic data as an output. And then as we have time, we're going to go to providing some decorations on here, some reds and greens and elapsed time. So those will be cool. All right. So we don't need, I'm going to clean up a little bit. We don't need Service Desk or Campfire open anymore, but we are going to go to our at a glance page. I'm going to open that in a new tab so we have it. Our at a glance page doesn't have anything on it right now, and so we'll be adding a listing to the page or a grid. And so we'll put it here and we'll manage it. What we're going to do is we're going to do a SQL query. And so I'm going to get us set up from scratch to do a SQL query, and then maybe we'll take a step back and we got to figure out what the SQL query is going to look like. I'm doing this as a SQL query because I want to manipulate the data a little bit rather than just grabbing the raw data. So let's take a look and build some SQL. And I'm going to find my SQL that I'm going towards here. So the first, the data is in overall health check. And so if I were to just say, and by the way, if you click something, it puts it on the clipboard. You can see it's on the clipboard. So I was able to just copy and paste that. We run it and we can see all of our rows. We can start narrowing down what we really want, which will probably need the ID, the status, eventually we're going to need the system, and this is if you have access to, I mean, having SQL skills is key to this one. We're going to do some a little bit complex SQL, but SQL Server Management Studio is another way to interactively build these. Let's see, we're going to end up needing the created date, which we're calling the as of date. And so like we can run that and get a little bit narrowed down so we can see that system 1 is normal as of a particular time. Now, this is good. I'm going to comment that out for a second. The thing is, we need the last, we're going to get statuses for the same systems over and over again. It's going to build lots of records. We only want the last status for the purpose of this display. I suspect there are people on the call that could do this much better than I, but there's a one way to do this would be to do a select, and we're going to get the last ID, so the max of ID and we're going to call that the last ID from our table here. But we're going to group by system. This is going to provide one row per system, and it's going to just have the last ID for each one. So 49, 50, 51 are the last ones for each system. And so that's going to be useful. We can now just return only the records that we care about. Those 3 records are the only ones we care about. The other ones are earlier, and we can plot them and do all kinds of things with them. But for the purposes of just a simple display, we only want the last ones. So what can we do with that? Well, if we say that we want to select the ID, the status system, all these fields from the health check, and we can say where the ID is in this list. This subquery is going to provide the IDs, and this outer query is going to give us the data. So now it's 56, 57, 58, or 5, 6, 7, whatever you can read. Okay, but this is cool because it's just going to give us only the last ones, what we need, and then it's going to give us the data. So it just keeps getting more and more complex, right? Because we're getting the data from app overall health check, but we also want to get some information from another table. I'm going to use the alias feature and do a little bit of aliasing here. So this is because we also want to get the name of the system. So I'm going to start by just providing specific. We want the HC fields, the health check fields, from health check where HCID is in this. Hopefully we didn't break anything by adding that. So now we've got very explicit aliasing. And so we want to interjoin the app system table, right? App system. And we're going to actually call this the sys table just for clarity. So we want the HC system equal to the sys. So this is going to give us the records where they match. It's an inner join. So if it doesn't match, it's not going to show up. And so now this gives us access to the sys table, or the system table. And so we can say that we want the sys dot name. So let's see if this works out for us. Okay, now we've got the name. So part of the beauty of SQL, right? So I think that's enough for now. We'll come back to this. And to make sure I don't lose it, I'm actually going to save this query. And so this query is going to be the. So if I happen to navigate away, we'll be able to recall this. But this is the SQL that we're going to want for our listing. And so we can pop that in there. And so we saw how we developed it. The idea of this is going to be the hc.id column. And I think that's all we need. We could we could do it in name order. So for example, we could take the sys name and sort by that. Let's see if that works. Oh, it doesn't like it. HCID could not be found. Let me double check what I'm doing here. Oh, I think this probably is just sufficient to say ID, and I'll keep myself out of trouble. I'm going to pull out the order by for now and try again. Okay, now it's saved. So we can add fields to our grid. Let's add everything and see what we have. So we'll save it, go back. So we have our current record, 76, 77, 78, everything operating normally. It all happened, and this is a UTC date. It all happened moments ago, and we can see the system that it came from. So we could have organized this a little bit. To keep things, I want to do some of the interesting things here. So I am going to jump back to my SQL and show you the two cool things we can do. So one of them is a clause that, let's say that we wanted to figure out whether something is normal or not. So I'm going to add another field in here, and it's a case clause. So when status equals normal, then true, else false, as something called IsNormal. So we're going to get, when we run this, we get a true false indication, and that's something that we can use in providing a nice output. So now I'm going to use this SQL in our this, get it open in a new tab. And so now we can add the IsNormal to the output. And so when we refresh, we see that we have IsNormal true. Now this is fun because you can add a, we go into our grid, and instead of just outputting the IsNormal field, if instead we can do a computed field and call it, we don't even have to have a title on it, but what we're going to do is maybe I'm not sure, maybe I didn't. Oh, I took a wrong turn here. I'm just on IsNormal, we just want to add formatting. Right. So we want to add true false formatting, and we can go two directions. One is we can add a item with a badge of success and OK, versus if it's false, we can add a badge danger. We're going to cover in another episode how we come up with those, but that formatting will potentially show us, and it's here, but
and do the allow HTML.
Thank you. Well, there's a couple of things that we got to do. This is actually a systems. I forgot to do the name here, but IsNormal here, and I will HTML. But another thing is there's probably going to have to be some CSS that happens here. So IsNormal is showing up. It's showing up as OK. It's not green. If we add it, we could add some styling to this so that it shows up with a better tag. And just to kind of give you a notice here, we're coming up on our hour. There's another cool thing that I want to add, and I'm going to go ahead and do it so it's part of the recording. Anybody who wants to stick around is welcome to do that. But the cool thing that I want to add is that it's kind of hard to read this time, right? This as of time, because comparing that to the real time, current time, and we could display it in portal time, but how long ago was that? And so we can do a display. Let me find it and show you what it looks like. I'll tell you what, I'll do this. This is my development system that I've been copying from. So when we do the IsNormal thing, well, it starts to be green or red, and so that's cool. And then, but a display of 4 minutes ago, or however, whatever the time is, as an elapsed time. And so I'm gonna add that to this recording. But I understand that if you have to go away, I understand. So I added this as a contribution to our campfire group. and it's just a very simple copy and paste that you can do. But whoops, wrong place. On our contributions, this is just a list of stuff that we do so that we can share techniques across, and very useful to do this with. Join the campfire group Fridays 10 the same hour Fridays. So here's the SQL that we're going to use, but this is what you're going to get. When I'm showing a grid here that shows how this works, where we've used this function to turn this 331 is actually 20 days ago. This is 16 minutes ago. This is a month ago. And so it's turning it into words. And so this function does that. It's a pretty straightforward SQL function. And it's set up so you can just copy and paste it. I'm putting this in public domain. I really don't care if you use if you keep all the comments to it, but it's easy to implement. You copy that, and we go back to our SQL console and paste it here, and then run the query. You can also do this in SQL Server Management Studio. But what it's doing is it's creating a function called display elapsed time. So we run this query. It doesn't have any results. And then we can test it out, and it actually shows, let's see where I had this. It shows a test that I didn't copy. You can just do something like select that. And so we can say, we can test to see that this works by putting in a date like 12/25/2021 and running it, and it says that that was 4 months ago. So the logic just returns relative time. And you could enhance that to do it to be much more precise or useful in your circumstance. I think the SQL is very readable, but that's that. So we're going to use this display elapsed time function now in our health check. Let's find it here, our grid. We'll change this and add, in addition to our IsNormal, we're going to add this function display the elapsed time of HC dot created date as elapsed time. And so this is going to give us another column, elapsed time, based on created date. And I happen to know all these are, that function is UTC based. The created date is UTC date based. So it's going to provide useful information. So we save that. Now we can add elapsed time as a field in our display and take a look at it. So now instead of seeing this kind of a date, we can just see this is 28 seconds ago. And so for our purposes, this is a lot easier to read. And so now all that's left is cleaning this up a little bit. We probably don't need the actual date anymore. What happened to IsNormal? Did I not save that? Oh, I know I've been in and out in a couple of different ways. So IsNormal, we can say allow HTML, and so this is probably going to show to the left of status. System will be first. We don't need ID. We don't need created date anymore. We're just going to say elapsed time is going to be something like as of. We'll just name it as of and save. Let's see if we're anywhere close here. So it's okay, normal. Oh, I managed to delete out the message out of that. But we can see it's now as of 5 seconds ago. So we can do a little bit more cleanup on that, but you get the idea. So now this page, we could publish it as our systems at a glance. You could see all whether everything's operating normally or not, as could we. All right, so thank you for those that hung in there with us. I hope you got some good stuff out of our low code cafe today. And we'll look for your feedback as to whether we should continue the dashboarding. We'll be building it out for ourselves, but whether you want to see it as additional sessions in weeks to come, give us your thoughts. All right, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on Low Code Cafe.
Excellent. Thank you, Dale.